My name's Thomas Reed, and I never thought I'd live long enough to watch my own brother stab me in the back. I'm 56 years old, not young, not old. Somewhere in that space where you've seen enough of life to know better, but still feel enough to get hurt. And believe me, nothing cuts deeper than betrayal that comes. Wearing a familiar face, they say blood is thicker than water. But whoever said that never watched their own blood walk away with everything that mattered, because I learned something different. Blood might bind you, but greed will burn every bridge, bury every promise, and tear you apart faster than anything else in this world. It all started on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day that doesn't warn you it's about to change your life. I was driving through Marion Springs, the same dusty little town where I grew up. The roads were still lined with oak trees, their branches stretching over the street like old memories trying to keep you safe. The air smelled of rain and dirt, familiar, grounding. For a moment I felt like a kid again, and then I saw it. Our old family home, the white farmhouse on Maple Street, the one my father built with his bare hands, standing there like a ghost from another lifetime. The paint had faded, the shutters were cracked, but to me it was still the most beautiful place on earth. That house wasn't just where we lived. It was who we were. Every corner had laughter soaked into the walls. Every scratch, every creak carried a story. Mom used to bake pies every Sunday morning. The smell of apple and cinnamon would drift through the screen door, and Dad would come in from the garage wiping grease off his hands, grumbling about the truck that never ran right but always ran just enough. We didn't have much, but somehow that house made everything feel whole. It was our safe place, and that's when my eyes caught something that made my heart twist so hard I thought I might pull over. A bright red "For Sale" sign stood in the front yard, but that wasn't what hit me the hardest. It was the name printed in bold black letters on the real estate board. Alan Reed Realty. For a moment, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe another Alan Reed, maybe just a weird coincidence. But deep down I knew there's only one Alan Reed that mattered to me, my younger brother. The same brother who once promised we'd never sell that house. The same brother who, when our parents passed, stood beside me with tears in his eyes and said, "We'll keep it, Tom, always, for Mom and Dad." Those were his words, his promise. But standing there that day, staring at that "For Sale" sign, I realized that promise had meant nothing. I pulled over across the street, just sitting there behind the wheel. My hands were trembling, not from age, not from weakness, but from something deeper, betrayal. I must have sat there for a long time, watching strangers pull up, walk around the yard, peek through the windows like they were shopping for something ordinary. To them, it was just a house, old, maybe a little rundown. To me, it was everything. It was where I'd learned to ride a bike, where I'd carved my initials into the porch railing. It was where Mom had hugged me when I failed my first test, and where Dad had taught me to throw a baseball. It was the last place our family had been whole, and now it had a price tag. Alan didn't even call me. Didn't even ask. He just sold it, no phone call. No warning, no brotherly discussion, just gone. I can't even describe that kind of silence, the kind that fills your chest when you realize someone you love made a decision that didn't even include you. It's like watching a door close from the other side, knowing you'll never walk through it again. I wanted to tell myself there was a reason, that maybe he was desperate, that maybe something forced his hand. But even that wouldn't have hurt as much as the truth I already knew. He didn't care enough to ask. When our parents died, I remember him saying, "We'll keep it in the family, Tom, always." And I believed him. Because that's what brothers are supposed to do, trust each other. But that day, sitting in my truck watching a stranger hammer another stake into the lawn of our childhood, I understood something I'd never wanted to face. Sometimes the person you'd fight hardest for is the same person who'd sell your memories to the highest bidder. I started the truck again, but I didn't drive away right away. I just sat there, staring at that porch. The paint was peeling near the steps where I once sat waiting for Dad to come home from work. The wind rattled the same old windows Mom used to clean every spring, and I swear, for a second I could almost hear her voice, soft, steady, comforting. "Let it go, Tommy. You can't hold on to everything." But letting go isn't that simple. Because sometimes, when someone takes what you love, and especially when it's your own blood, You don't just lose a place. You lose a piece of yourself. That day didn't just break my heart, it changed me. It lit a fire I didn't even know I had left. Because when someone sells your past, sometimes the only thing left to do is build a future they'll never see coming. And that's where my story truly begins. The day I realized that the man I trusted, more than anyone else, had put a price tag on our history, our parents' legacy, and everything we once were. That was the day everything changed. I grew up in a small, tight-knit town called Marion Springs, just a short drive outside of Austin, Texas. You could drive through it in 10 minutes if you didn't stop for gas or coffee. But to me, that little town was the whole world. Everyone knew everyone. Folks waved at you whether they liked you or not. And gossip traveled faster than the wind that rolled over the hills in late summer. Our house sat on the edge of town, where the pavement turned into gravel, and the noise of the world seemed to fade into crickets and wind chimes. It wasn't much by today's standards, a 2-story farmhouse with paint that was always flaking and a porch that sagged a little under the weight of time. But it was ours. Dad built it himself, hammer by hammer, nail by nail. Every corner of that place carried his touch, his patience, and his stubbornness. The wooden beams were thick, rough, and honest, and just like him. Dad was a mechanic, the kind of man whose hands were always stained with oil no matter how hard he scrubbed. He had this quiet strength about him, a man of few words, but when he spoke, you listened. He wasn't educated past high school, but he knew how to fix things. Cars, tractors, broken chairs, broken hearts sometimes. He'd say, "Son, nothing in life stays broken if you care enough to fix it." Mom was the opposite. A school teacher with a heart that could soften the hardest soul. She had this gentle way of making everything feel right, whether it was a scraped knee, a bad grade, or Dad coming home late after another long day at the shop. The house always smelled of her. Soap, coffee, and that floral perfume she'd wear even when she was just cleaning the kitchen. Then there was Alan, my younger brother by 4 years. Alan was, well, the golden boy. Everyone loved him. Teachers adored him. He had that easy charm that made people smile even when he didn't try. He was the captain of the football team, straight A student, the kind of guy who seemed to glide through life. He had a smile that could talk his way out of trouble, and believe me, he did plenty of talking. Me, I was different, quieter. I never had his confidence or his charm. I was the one who stayed behind after school to help Dad fix the old Chevy, or the one who'd patch the leaky roof when the summer storms rolled through. While Alan was out with friends or chasing girls, I was the one sweeping sawdust in the garage, learning how to build, repair, and listen. We didn't have much money, but we had pride. The kind that comes from hard work and love. Our house was proof of that. It wasn't fancy, but it had soul. The kitchen was Mom's favorite place. I can still see her there. Apron tied tight, flour on her cheek, humming an old tune as she rolled out dough. Sunday mornings were sacred. She'd bake pies, apple, peach, sometimes pecan if we were lucky. And the smell would drift through every room, pulling us out of bed like magic. Dad would be out front, tuning up someone's pickup, radio playing low, singing along to old country songs. I'd hand him tools, pretending I knew what I was doing. He'd glance up sometimes, grin, and say, "You've got good hands. Tommy, these hands can build a life." Every inch of that house had a story. The creaky step by the hallway. That was where Alan tripped during his first date and spilled lemonade all over himself. The faded pencil marks on the kitchen doorway. That's where Mom used to measure how tall we were getting every year. The attic still smelled like old Christmases. Pine needles, tinsel, and dust from decades of laughter. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was life, stitched together by moments that seemed small at the time but meant everything later. When Dad passed first, a heart attack in his workshop, the world just slowed down. The silence in that house was deafening. I could still hear his tools rattling on the pegboard, his voice echoing faintly in my head. Mom kept everything just as it was for years. She said it made her feel like he was still home. Then, when Mom followed him a few years later, something in that house changed again. It felt emptier, colder, like the walls themselves were grieving. After the funeral, Alan and I sat in the kitchen for hours, not saying much. Just drinking coffee, staring at the table where she used to sit. Finally, he said, "We'll keep it. Tom. Always, no matter what." And I believed him. That house wasn't just property, it was a promise, a legacy. the last piece of who we were as a family. For a while, it stayed that way. Alan moved to the city, chasing business and ambition. I stayed behind, kept the lights on, made repairs when the pipes froze or the roof leaked. It was lonely sometimes, but I didn't mind. That house felt alive when I was there, like it remembered me. Then came Monica. I met her at a Christmas dinner, years after Alan had moved. She was polished. That's the best word I can use. Everything about her was perfect. The hair, the dress, the way she spoke. But there was something in her eyes, something sharp. Like every word she said had a layer of judgment beneath it. She smiled at me that night, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile people give when they've already decided who you are, and they've decided you're beneath them. I could tell she didn't belong in Marion Springs. She belonged to country clubs, to dinner parties where people pretended to laugh at things that weren't funny. At first, I tried to like her, for Alan's sake. But Monica, she had this way of making you feel small without saying a word. The first time she visited the old farmhouse, she walked through the rooms like she was inspecting a museum. She ran her fingers over the wooden banister and said, "It's quaint." That word stung more than she probably knew. After Mom's funeral, I caught her looking around the house again. Her eyes lingered on the peeling paint, the creaky floorboards, the old furniture. Then she turned to Alan and said softly, but not soft enough, "You could get a fortune for this place." I remember how Alan's eyes flickered, how he didn't say a word but didn't shut her down either. That's when I knew. Something was changing. Alan used to love that house. He'd tell people it was where he learned to be a man. But Monica? She didn't see memories and she saw dollar signs. She wanted more. A bigger house, a fancier life, friends who drove German cars and wore designer watches, and Alan. He started wanting those things too. It didn't happen overnight. It was slow, the kind of change that sneaks up on you. He stopped visiting as often, stopped asking about repairs. When we did talk, it was all about his business ventures, investments, market trends. I barely recognized the man on the other end of the phone. Meanwhile, I stayed where I'd always been, keeping the family home alive, holding on to the last piece of our parents' world. But time has a cruel way of showing you that not everyone values what you do. And even blood can fade, the way old paint peels off the walls after years of weather. Looking back now, I can see it clear as day the moment the distance began. The moment he started seeing the house as a burden, and I kept seeing it as a blessing. That house, the one we built with our hands and filled with love, became the line that divided us. I just didn't know then how far that line would go, or how deeply it would cut. It happened 3 years after Mom passed. 3 long years of quiet Sundays, of fixing creaky steps that no one walked on anymore, of keeping a house alive that felt more like a memory than a home. The seasons had come and gone, Texas summers that scorched the fields, winters that nipped at the window frames, but through it all, I stayed. I kept the old place standing because it felt like keeping them standing too. Alan, on the other hand, was living a different life. He'd moved out to San Antonio, started his own real estate company, and surrounded himself with people who thought the world started and ended at expensive dinners and country clubs. We'd talk occasionally, birthdays, holidays, but the conversations felt thinner each year, like a rope slowly fraying. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. "Hey, Tommy," Alan said, in that breezy, casual tone of his. It was the voice he used when he wanted something. "Been thinking about the old place. Maybe fixing it up, renting it out. You know, make some money off it instead of just letting it sit." I remember pausing. Something about the way he said, "make some money off it," rubbed me raw. But I kept my voice steady. "Sure, Alan," I said. "As long as we do it together." He hesitated. Just a breath and then said, "Of course, man, together." He laughed lightly, the way people do when they're already lying. For weeks, I didn't hear another word. No updates, no calls, nothing. I figured maybe he got busy, maybe he'd bring it up again later. I was used to him vanishing into his own world. Business meetings, weekend trips, whatever rich people things he was doing now. Then one day, while I was driving through Marion Springs on my way to a job, just a regular Tuesday morning, I took a detour down Maple Street. I hadn't planned to stop by the house, but something in me wanted to see it. Maybe just to check on it, make sure the place was still breathing. But what I saw stopped me cold. There was a moving truck in the driveway. Two men, strangers, were carrying furniture out of the house. A woman stood on the porch with a clipboard directing them. For a second, I thought maybe Alan had hired movers to start the renovation. But then I saw it. A shiny sold sticker slapped across a real estate sign planted right there in the front yard. I pulled over so fast the tires screeched. My hands were shaking as I climbed out of the truck. I must have looked like a madman as I crossed the street and called out, "Hey! Excuse me, what's going on here?" The woman on the porch smiled politely. "Oh, hi. You must be the neighbor. The new owners are moving in today." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. New owners. That was our home. The same house Alan and I had promised to protect. The same place that held every echo of our childhood. And now strangers were hauling out what was left of it. Old furniture, boxes, tools, as if it was just another piece of property changing hands. I didn't even remember getting back into my truck. I just remember sitting there numb, staring through the windshield at the place that raised me. The front door, the one Dad built with his own two hands, swung open and shut as people went in and out. The laughter of strangers filled the yard, the kind that used to belong to our family. It felt like watching someone dig up your parents' graves and call it a renovation. When I finally called Alan, I didn't start with a hello. "Alan," I snapped, "what the hell did you do?" There was a pause. Then that same calm, practiced voice, the one he used when he was trying to sound reasonable. "Relax, Tom. It was just an old house. We split the money 50-50. I could hear him sipping something, maybe coffee, maybe a drink, like this was just another business deal. "It was Mom and Dad's house," I said, my voice trembling. "Our house, Alan? You sold it without even telling me?" He sighed like I was being difficult. "Come on, man. It's not that deep. The place was falling apart, and honestly, I figured you wouldn't mind. You never did anything with it anyway." That line, "you never did anything with it anyway," burned into me. Because he couldn't see that keeping that house alive was something. Every nail I'd replaced, every leak I'd fixed, every lonely night I'd sat there keeping it company. It all meant something. But to him, it was just a number on a spreadsheet. "It wasn't yours to sell," I said quietly. "I handled the paperwork," he replied. "Don't worry. The lawyer said it's all legal. You'll get your cut." "My cut," I repeated. The words tasted bitter. "You think this is about money?" "Tom," he said, almost sounding bored now, "don't make this emotional. It's just business," and that's when I knew I'd lost him. Not just the house, but my brother. The man I grew up with, the boy who used to sneak out the window with me to go fishing. The kid who cried when Dad yelled at him for denting the truck. That Alan was gone. The one on the phone wasn't my brother anymore. He was someone else. Someone who'd traded his heart for a calculator. I didn't argue anymore. There was no point. I hung up. Sat there in silence, staring at the house as the last moving van pulled away. The sun was setting behind it, painting the sky gold, and for the first time in my life, that house looked smaller, empty, like it had finally given up too. That night, Alan sent me a text. Just one line. "Check your account tomorrow." I made the transfer. I didn't reply. The next morning, I saw the deposit. It was more money than I'd seen in a long time, and my half. But looking at it made me sick. I didn't touch it. Not a cent. I called the bank and told them to send it back because that money wasn't payment. It was guilt. It was him trying to buy forgiveness, and you can't buy back what you destroy. I remember sitting in the dark that night, the air heavy with silence. I could almost hear Dad's voice in my head. "A man's word means everything, Tommy. Don't ever sell your word." But Alan had sold his, for profit. For convenience. Maybe even for her. For Monica, the woman who'd probably whispered that idea into his ear. He'd sold not just a house, but a promise. Our parents' legacy. Our shared past. I didn't go back to the old place after that. Couldn't. I'd drive around Marion Springs, take the long way home just so I wouldn't have to see it. It was too painful. Like looking at an old photograph of someone you love but can't forgive. But something changed inside me that day. A quiet fire lit up, not the kind that burns fast and wild, but the kind that smolders deep, waiting for its moment. I didn't plan revenge. Not then, but I swore one thing to myself. Alan had taken what was ours, not just property but meaning. He'd ripped out a piece of my heart and sold it like it was nothing, and one day, I'd take something back, something that would make him feel the same hollow ache he left in me. That day, I stopped being the quiet brother. I stopped being the man who let things slide in the name of family. I became something else. Someone patient, steady, and ready to let time do what it does best. Because time doesn't just heal, it teaches. And eventually, it evens the score. That's when the betrayal became something more than just pain. It became a promise, not of anger, but of balance. And I knew deep down, Alan's day would come. Years have a way of softening some wounds, but not this one. The hurt that Alan left behind didn't fade. It just sank deeper, settled somewhere under my ribs where time couldn't reach it. I didn't dwell on it every day, but it lived there. Like an ache that never quite heals, life went on, as it always does. I threw myself into my work. A small carpentry business I ran out of a modest workshop behind my rented house. Nothing fancy, but every plank, every nail, every job I took was done with care. I built fences, restored porches, repaired roofs after summer storms. Folks in town knew me as Tom, the man who still works with his hands. They'd wave when I drove by in my dusty pickup. Sometimes they'd bring pie or coffee when I helped fix something for less than it was worth. It wasn't wealth, but it was peace, and the honest peace. Alan, though, he lived in another world. Every once in a while I'd see him. Not in person, but through the glossy glow of Facebook posts that Monica seemed to update every other day. There they were, smiling in photos from Napa Valley, drinking wine on sunlit terraces. Trips to Cabo, new cars, charity galas with tuxedos and sequined gowns. Monica loved to tag everything, near success to her power couple. Living the dream, and maybe they were living it, at least. That's what it looked like. I'd scroll past the pictures quietly at night, sitting alone with a beer, staring at that perfect world they'd built. And sometimes I'd catch myself wondering, was it worth it? Selling out, forgetting where you came from, treating people like stepping stones. But I'd push the thought away and get back to work the next morning. My days were full, my nights calm, simple maybe, but real. Then one summer, I heard the first whispers. It started at the lumber yard. A man named Reggie, an old friend from high school who now worked in contracting, leaned on the counter and said, "Hey, Tom, you heard about your brother's company?" I looked up from signing the receipt. "What about it?" He smirked. That kind of smirk people give when they have gossip but don't want to say it too loud. Word is he's in trouble. Took on too many developments, markets cooling down, investors pulling out. I tried to act like I didn't care. "Is that so?" Reggie shrugged. "That's what they're saying. You know how it goes. When the money stops rolling in, everyone finds religion real fast." I laughed politely, but inside something stirred. I didn't want to enjoy his downfall, not yet anyway. But there was a strange, quiet sense of inevitability about it. Like time was finally turning the wheel back to where it belonged. Over the next few months, the rumors grew louder. I heard about projects left unfinished, lawsuits, missed payments. I heard that Alan had mortgaged half his assets to fund his real estate ventures, betting everything on markets that were now collapsing. And then, the whispers turned personal. People said Monica wasn't handling it well, that she'd been seen crying in her car outside the country club after they suspended their membership, that she stopped showing up to charity events, stopped posting those glamorous photos. The woman who once couldn't eat dinner without showing it off online had gone silent. It's strange how silence can be louder than noise. Then one afternoon, as I was fixing a porch for an elderly couple, I overheard something that made me freeze mid-hammer. Two women walking by, local realtors chatting about listings. "Did you see the Hillcrest property?" One said. "The big white one? The one with that view over the valley?" "Oh, the Wilkins place?" The other asked. "No," the first said, lowering her voice. "That's Alan Cole's house. It's on the market. Divorce rumors, too." The hammer slipped from my hand, clattering onto the deck. The Hillcrest house. I knew that place. Everyone in town did. Monica had shown it off at every family dinner, every Christmas, every chance she got. Our dream home, she used to call it. A pristine white two-story mansion with wide glass windows and a balcony that overlooked the entire valley. I remember her once saying in front of everyone, From that balcony, you can see all of Marion Springs. Imagine having a view of everything. At the time, I didn't say a word, but I remembered the way she said everything, like she wasn't just talking about scenery, like she was talking about being above people, especially me. And now that house, her castle, was up for sale. That night, I sat on my porch under a dim light, the cicadas humming in the fields beyond. I thought about Alan and Monica, their perfect lives crumbling like a mansion built on sand. I thought about Dad, how he used to say, "Pride's a heavy crown, son. Sooner or later it'll break your neck." Maybe this was that moment. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. But I did feel something shift inside me. A calm realization that life was drawing its lines. Fate wasn't done writing our story yet. I didn't plan anything that night. Didn't think about revenge or justice or balance. But as I looked up at the dark sky and saw the faint lights on the hill where their house stood, I couldn't shake the feeling that some invisible hand had just moved the first piece on the board. And somewhere deep down, I heard a quiet whisper, maybe my own conscience, maybe something greater saying, "Wait, watch, the time will come." And it did. Because a few weeks later, when I saw the official listing for the Hillcrest property, Alan and Monica Cole, current owners, open house Saturday, 10 a.m., I didn't hesitate. I didn't plan revenge. It just happened, like fate was handing me a script and all I had to do was follow it. It was one of those calm, quiet Texas mornings, the kind that almost feels like the world's taking a deep breath before something big happens. The sky was still cool from the night before, and the sun had just started stretching its light across the valley. I was out front trimming the hedges, enjoying the slow rhythm of it, the smell of cut grass, the sound of my shears clipping in steady, peaceful beats. The Hillcrest neighborhood was different from where I used to live. Clean streets, manicured lawns, shiny cars that looked like they'd never seen a dirt road. Folks here waved politely but didn't really talk. The kind of people who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. I fit in about as well as a carpenter at a stockbroker's meeting. But I didn't mind. I wasn't here to fit in. I was here because I'd earned it. The quiet, the view, the justice that had taken its sweet time arriving. And that's when I heard the engine, a deep hum, smooth and expensive, the kind of car that announces itself before you even see it. I turned just as a black SUV rolled up the hill and slowed to a stop in front of my driveway. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe a neighbor, maybe some folks lost looking for an open house. But then I saw them step out, Alan and Monica. I froze, my shears still in my hand, the sunlight glinting off the metal. It had been years since I'd seen them, not since the fallout. Time had changed them. Alan looked heavier, not in body but in spirit. His shoulders sagged like the weight of his own choices had finally settled in. His hair was thinner, his face pale and lined in ways that didn't come from age alone. And Monica, she still looked like she walked out of a lifestyle magazine. Crisp blouse, expensive sunglasses, hair done just right. But something was missing in her eyes. The shine, the arrogance, the way she used to look at the world like it was hers to command. Now she looked tired, hollow. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stood there at the edge of the driveway staring at me like they were seeing a ghost. Then Monica's hand flew to her mouth, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas?" Alan's face went pale as the morning sky. He blinked once, twice, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. I took off my gloves slowly, dusted off my hands, and smiled. Calm, steady, not smug, not cruel. Just peaceful. "Morning, Alan." "Monica." You could have heard a pin drop. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Alan swallowed hard. This is your house?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said simply, leaning on the hedge trimmer. "Figured I'd buy something with a nice view." For a moment, nobody spoke. The air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath with us. Monica's sunglasses slipped down her nose as her eyes darted around, from the porch she used to brag about, to the balcony she called her sanctuary, and then back to me. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. I could see it all right there on her face, and the confusion, the disbelief, the shame. She looked at Alan like maybe this was some cruel joke, some misunderstanding. But the truth was staring right back at her, living and breathing in front of her, trimming the hedges of the house she once owned. Alan looked like he wanted to say something, maybe to explain, maybe to apologize. But all that came out was silence. Finally, he managed a quiet, "How did you—" He trailed off, not sure how to finish the question. "How did I afford it?" I said, finishing it for him. "Guess I just worked hard. You remember that, right? Hard work?" It wasn't said with venom, more like an echo of the past. Alan's jaw tightened. Monica crossed her arms, her pride kicking in like a reflex. "Well," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I hope you enjoy it." I looked her dead in the eye. "Oh, I do. Every single day, and I meant it, not out of spite. Not because I wanted to see them hurt, but because for once life had balanced the scales, and I was just standing there watching the universe do its job." They stood there for another moment, both of them unsure what to say. I think they wanted to leave but couldn't quite make their legs move. Alan looked around and at the flowers I'd planted, the clean porch, the repaired mailbox. I could almost see the memories flashing through his head, all the barbecues, the parties, the nights he'd stood on that same lawn thinking he had everything, and now he had nothing. "Guess things change," he said finally, his voice low. "Yeah," I replied softly. "Guess they do." They turned to go, but I called out, "Hey, Alan." He stopped, looking back. I smiled faintly. "Funny thing, isn't it? You sold our family home without even telling me. And now, here we are." Alan didn't answer. He just nodded, eyes down, and walked back to the SUV. Monica didn't look back. She kept her chin high, sunglasses back in place, and the same armor she always wore. But her steps were faster than his, sharper, almost desperate. When the SUV pulled away, I stood there for a long time, watching it disappear down the hill until it was just another car in the distance. Then I looked back at the house, their dream house, my home now. The sun had risen higher, spilling light across the porch and the fields below. The valley stretched out wide and endless, and for the first time, that view didn't feel like something I was looking down on. It felt like something I was finally standing above, not out of arrogance, but peace. That encounter wasn't about revenge, it was about closure. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. Slow, quiet but precise. And as I stood there trimming the last few hedges, I realized something. Sometimes justice doesn't need a grand speech or a dramatic ending. Sometimes it just needs a Sunday morning, a quiet smile, and the simple truth standing right in front of you. The same brother who once sold our past now had to stand and watch me live his dream, and I didn't gloat. Didn't need to, because some victories speak louder in silence. I didn't gloat, didn't throw his downfall back in his face. Didn't need to. Life had already done the work for me. But I could see it in their eyes that day. That quiet pain, that invisible wound you can't patch with money or pride. The same kind of hurt they once gave me, back when they sold our family home without a word. It's funny how the wheel turns. For a while, I didn't hear from Alan after that Sunday morning. Not a call, not a message, nothing. And that was fine by me. I didn't expect an apology, and I sure didn't expect closure. I'd already made peace with the past, one quiet sunrise at a time. But life, it has its own timing. About a month later, I stopped by Mary's Diner, an old corner spot off Main Street where the coffee's strong, the pie's sweet, and the waitress calls everyone hun. I went there most Sundays after church. Same booth, same order. Black coffee, eggs over easy, and a side of hash browns. That morning, though, when I walked in, something was different. The place was half full, usual faces, farmers, shop owners, retired folks. But sitting alone in the back corner with a paper cup and that familiar slump to his shoulders was Alan. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him. His hair had gone grayer than I remembered, his skin drawn tight, eyes hollow. The kind of look a man gets when sleep's been replaced by worry and regret. He wasn't dressed like the confident real estate man he used to be. No blazer, no gold watch, just a plain shirt, wrinkled, and a jacket that had seen better days. I stood there a moment, not sure what to do. My gut told me to turn around to leave him be, but something in the way he sat, still, quiet, defeated, stopped me. So I walked over. Alan. He looked up slowly, his eyes widening with something between surprise and shame. "Tom," he said softly, like the word itself hurt to speak. I nodded toward the seat across from him. This taken? He shook his head. No, go ahead. I slid into the booth, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The sound of silverware clinking, someone laughing at the counter, the low hum of country music. It all filled the silence we didn't know how to break. Finally, he sighed and looked down at his coffee. I didn't expect to see you. Same, I said quietly. He nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of the cup. Then after a long pause he spoke, voice low, steady but cracked around the edges. I messed up, Tom. I didn't say anything. Just let him talk. I thought I was doing the right thing, he continued. Selling the house. It felt like moving on, you know? Like we needed to close that chapter. I told myself it was just a building, that we'd outgrown it. But he stopped, took a shaky breath. I see now. I sold more than that. I sold our soul. His voice trembled on that last word. And for the first time in a long time I saw my brother. Not the arrogant businessman, not the man chasing money and approval, but the kid I grew up with. The one who used to steal Dad's tools and help me build tree houses behind the shed. The boy who laughed so hard he'd snort, who swore we'd always have each other's backs. I stared at him for a while, feeling that old ache stir again. All those years of resentment, all that bitterness, and it was still there, but duller now. Like a scar that still remembers the pain but doesn't hurt anymore. I know, I said finally. Yeah, you did mess up. Alan looked up, bracing himself for the anger I didn't give him. But, I continued, sometimes losing something teaches you what it really meant. He blinked at me, and I could see his jaw tremble, the weight of those years pressing down. He nodded slowly, like the truth of it was settling in. He reached for his coffee again, his hand shaking a little. The mug rattled against the saucer. I don't blame you, he said, voice quiet, eyes on the table, for buying the house. You earned that one. I get it now. I sat back watching him. He wasn't making excuses anymore. No pride, no half-hearted justifications. Just a man facing the mirror of his own choices. I thought about all the years between us. The good ones, the bad ones, the silence that had stretched too long. Then I looked at him, really looked at him. You know, I said, Mom used to say everything comes back around sooner or later. Maybe this is just that. He gave a small laugh. Tired? Broken, but real. Yeah, he said. Guess she was right. We talked for a while after that. Not much, just little things. How his business had collapsed, how he and Monica had separated, how she'd moved to Dallas to be near her sister, how he'd been trying to find work again, start over. And I listened, not with pity, not even with forgiveness yet, just as a brother. Before he left, he reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. His grip was weak but honest. Thank you for talking to me, Tom. I didn't deserve it. I looked him in the eye. We both made mistakes, Alan, but maybe it's not about deserving. Maybe it's about learning. He nodded, eyes glassy, and stood to leave. As he walked out of the diner, the bell above the door jingled, and sunlight poured in behind him. For a second it caught the gray in his hair, silver streaks that reminded me of Dad. And right there, I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge might feel satisfying for a moment, but forgiveness frees you. When I finished my coffee and looked out the window, I saw Alan's SUV pulling away. Old, dusty, not like the polished one from before. He didn't look back. But for the first time in years, I didn't need him to. We were even. Not because I'd won, but because I'd let go. And that peace, that quiet calm that settled in my chest as I paid my bill and stepped into the Texas sunlight. That was worth more than any house, any view, or any victory. Because sometimes what comes around isn't punishment, and it's understanding. And when it finally does, it teaches you that no matter how deep the hurt runs, healing always finds its way home. Owning that house didn't make me rich, didn't make me powerful, didn't even make me feel like I'd won anything, but it made me whole. There was something sacred about walking through those halls again. Not because they were grand or beautiful, but because every corner whispered memories that time had tried to erase. The old wood creaked the same way it did when Dad used to sneak in after work, too tired to take off his boots. The light that streamed through the kitchen window in the morning still painted the walls gold, just like when Mom used to hum while cooking breakfast. For years, I thought buying that house back was about proving something, To Alan, to Monica, maybe even to myself. But standing there alone one evening, I realized it wasn't about revenge at all. It was about coming home to the truth I'd forgotten, that some things in life can't be bought, only earned. And peace is one of them. It was late that night, and the world outside was quiet. The air smelled faintly of rain, and the crickets sang in the fields beyond the oak trees. I stepped out onto the balcony, the one Monica used to call her dream view. I remember the way she said it years ago, her voice filled with pride, her eyes sweeping over the land like it was a crown she wore. Back then, that balcony was their symbol of success, the perfect spot for her wine glasses, her parties, her photographs. But as I stood there now, barefoot, holding a cup of black coffee instead of champagne, I saw something different. Dreams aren't about walls and glass. They're not about how high you build or how much you own. They're about what stays inside you when everything else falls apart. That night, I leaned on the railing and looked across the open fields where I used to play as a boy. Fireflies danced in the tall grass just like they always had. The air was thick with that familiar Texas stillness, heavy, quiet, honest. And right there I understood something that years of bitterness had kept from me. Peace doesn't come from payback. It comes from knowing you stayed true when others didn't. It comes from walking through the storm and realizing you never lost yourself to it. I had every reason to hate Alan, to turn my back the way he once turned his. But the truth is, hate only ties you to what hurt you. Forgiveness, though, that's freedom. Alan eventually moved away, somewhere smaller, quieter. A town with fewer people and less noise. He started over, far from the shadows of who he used to be. I heard he bought a small hardware store, spent his mornings opening the shutters, greeting regulars, fixing what was broken. Funny how life works. He used to sell dreams wrapped in square footage and price tags. Now he fixed hinges, pipes, in people's homes one nail at a time. And maybe that was his redemption. Not to rebuild what he'd lost, but to repair what he could. We talk now, from time to time. Not like before, not with the laughter we once had, but with something gentler. Something that doesn't need to be loud to be real. He calls on birthdays, sometimes on quiet evenings, just to ask how I'm doing. And that's enough. There's a strange comfort in that, knowing that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just softens its edges. It doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. It just means you've both learned how to live with the cracks. Every time I walk through that house now, I feel both the weight and the lightness of everything that happened. The walls don't echo with anger anymore, just with stories. Stories of loss, of pride, of choices we can't undo but can learn from. I kept Mom's old rocking chair on the porch, the one Alan almost sold years ago. On quiet afternoons, I sit there watching the wind roll through the fields. Sometimes I think about what life might have been if things hadn't gone wrong, if Alan hadn't sold the house, if we hadn't drifted apart. But then I remind myself, maybe it had to happen this way. Maybe we both had to break to understand what mattered. Maybe peace isn't found in keeping everything perfect, but in surviving what wasn't. And that's the truth I learned. You can lose the house, the family, the name, all of it, and still find your way back home, not because the world gives it back, but because you finally learned to stand inside your own peace. Sometimes, the greatest victory isn't in reclaiming what was taken. It's in forgiving who took it, and realizing you never really lost yourself after all. Would you like me to write Section 9, The Last Sunset, where Thomas finally says goodbye to his parents' memory and finds closure in one final act? I still drive by the old family house sometimes. Not often, just enough to remind myself how far I've come. The first few times I went, I couldn't even bring myself to slow down. I'd grip the steering wheel tight, my heart pounding, every memory clawing its way back up from the past. But time, as it does, softened those sharp edges. Now when I drive past it, I roll the window down, let the warm Texas breeze drift in, and just look. The place looks different now. The new owners painted it pale blue, lighter than the white it used to be. The porch railings are fixed, the shutters replaced. Out front, they planted roses. Red, full, beautiful roses that bloom every spring. Mom used to plant daisies there, said roses were too proud for country soil. But somehow seeing those roses doesn't hurt. Not anymore. I used to think losing that house meant losing everything. I thought when Alan sold it, he tore the last thread that held our family together. For a long time, that belief became my wound. something I carried like a scar across every day that followed. I let it shape me, harden me, define me. But life has a quiet way of teaching you what really matters. Because the truth is, that house was never what made us a family. It wasn't the walls or the porch or even the smell of Mom's pies that made it home. It was what happened inside it. The laughter, the forgiveness after every fight. The way Dad used to pat our shoulders and say, "As long as we've got each other, we'll be fine." That's what home really was. You can sell the wood, the land, the bricks, but you can't sell that. You can't auction off memories. You can't put a price tag on the sound of your mother's voice calling you in for dinner, or the way your father looked at you when you handed him a wrench. You can't lose something that lives inside you. I remember one summer evening, not long after Alan moved away. I was standing out on the balcony of the Hillcrest house, his house, her dream home, the one that once symbolized everything I thought I'd lost. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky gold and crimson. The whole valley glowed with that soft, forgiving light that only Texas sunsets know how to give. I stood there listening to the wind, feeling the peace that had taken me half a lifetime to find. It hit me then. Home isn't a place you go back to. It's a feeling you take with you. It's the smell of sawdust on your hands after a long day's work. It's the warmth of knowing you did right by the people who raised you. It's the kind of quiet pride that doesn't need recognition. The kind that only comes from living honestly, even when no one's watching. And suddenly, I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need to prove a point or win anything back. I realized I already had what Alan was still searching for. Peace. The kind of peace that doesn't shout or gloat or make headlines. The kind that sits quietly in your chest and lets you sleep at night. Sometimes I wonder if Alan ever drives by the Hillcrest house. It was late autumn when I finally decided to visit the cemetery again. The air had that quiet chill to it. Not the kind that bites, but the kind that makes you reflect. The trees around the old graveyard had turned gold and orange, their leaves whispering in the wind like memories passing through time. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I walked the narrow path between the headstones, each one holding a story, each one a reminder of how short and how precious life really is. I hadn't been there in years. Not since the day we buried Mom. Back then, everything felt so heavy, like grief had wrapped itself around my chest and wouldn't let go. But that morning it felt different, peaceful. I carried a small bunch of wildflowers, the kind Mom used to grow behind the house, near the old laundry line. She always said store-bought flowers looked too perfect. She liked the ones with crooked stems and uneven petals, said they had more life in them. When I reached their graves, I just stood there for a moment, hands in my pockets, watching the sunlight spill across the marble. The headstones were side by side, Harold and Marie Reed. Dad's had a little grease stain on the edge from when I'd once fixed the nearby fence. It made me smile. Even after all these years, he still couldn't escape a bit of dirt and work. I knelt down, placed the flowers between them, and let out a slow breath. "Hey, Mom." "Hey, Dad," I said softly. It's been a while, silence. But not an empty one. The kind that fills your soul instead of draining it. I could almost hear Dad's chuckle, low and rough, and Mom's gentle hum as she used to fold laundry by the porch. "I wanted to tell you something," I continued. "I finally figured it out." "Took me long enough, huh?" I laughed under my breath, the kind of laugh that carries both sadness and healing. "You were right, Mom. About everything. About kindness. About letting go. About how no matter what happens, you don't let bitterness eat you alive. I held on to that house for too long. Not the wood and walls, but the pain. I thought I needed revenge to make things right. Turns out all I needed was peace." A small breeze passed, scattering a few leaves across the grass. The sunlight caught them midair, and for a second it looked like the whole place was glowing. "I saw Alan," I said. "He's doing better, trying to make things right in his own way. I think he finally understands what family really means, and maybe that's enough." I paused, swallowing that lump in my throat that comes when you realize how much time you've lost, and how much you've finally gained by forgiving. I live in a nice place now. "Has that balcony Monica used to brag about?" I smiled faintly. "But you know what? When I stand out there and look at the sunset, I don't see her dreams or his mistakes. I see you too. I see home. For a while, I just sat there, listening to the soft rustle of the trees and the faint hum of crickets waking up in the distance. The sky was turning a pale orange, that tender light between day and dusk. Dad used to call it the last light. Said it's the moment when the world exhales before night takes over. You can't hold on to the day forever, he'd tell me. But you can be grateful you got to see it. That's what this moment felt like. Gratitude. Not for what I lost, but for what I learned through losing it. I brushed the dust off their names, traced the letters with my fingertips and whispered, I finally came home. Then I stood up, straightened my jacket, and took one last look at their graves before walking back toward the gate. The sun had nearly dipped below the horizon now, bathing everything in that warm golden light that feels like forgiveness itself. As I walked, I felt lighter, like every heavy memory had finally found its place to rest. I thought about all the years I'd spent angry, all the nights I'd replayed what Alan did, all the moments I thought revenge would somehow fix what was broken. And then I realized it already was fixed. Just not in the way I expected, because forgiveness isn't something you give for others. It's something you give to free yourself. When I reached the gate, I turned one last time. The cemetery behind me glowed softly under the dying sun, and the wind carried the faint scent of those wildflowers I'd left behind. I smiled. Life had come full circle. The boy who grew up in that old farmhouse had become the man who finally understood what home truly was. It wasn't the house that made us. It was the love that built it, and the forgiveness that kept it alive long after the walls were gone. And as I stepped back into my truck, the sky above me burned in streaks of orange and gold, the last light fading into the promise of a new night. Home isn't a place, it's peace, and after all these years, I'd finally found mine.